It's me, Katie. And as you can see, we do have a guest today, Miss Mac. I'm going to just jump right in and introduce them. You know, they do have their pronoun, she, Faye. I had to look up what Faye meant, and it meant like mystical fairy, which I really do appreciate. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, you can use it like they, similarly to they, so.
Yeah, I looked it up. I was like, okay, that is really, really cool. Alright, y'all, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Miss Mac. They go by She Faye, a certified holistic sex educator and the creator of Sober S3x Series. Miss Mac created the Sober S3x Series to help folks navigate the complexities of sex and sobriety, which we're probably all familiar with, moving beyond restricted binaries that often bind us. In this episode, we're going to take a dive into sobriety and intimacy, healing through relationships, and much more. Okay, let's welcome our guest, Ms. Mac.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm good. I'm reeling from the eclipse energy. I just moved house, so I've been very discombobulated, so I'm appreciative to sit down for an hour and enjoy.
Where was the eclipse in your chart, if you don't mind sharing that information? I know some folks.
I guess I'm a Taurus and Virgo rising, Cancer moon, so like a crybaby that has their shit together. Oh, can I swear? That has their stuff together. What about you?
So, okay, I mean, this is my first time really interacting with you in person. So wow, I didn't think you would. I thought you would have more like air in you.
I honestly thought it's like kind of a tragedy. This isn't air, but I thought that I was a Leo rising until like maybe like 3 months ago or something, and then I found out I was a Virgo rising, and I was like, no, like I don't want to be, like please no. But yeah, I definitely am like right on the cusp of that, if you believe in that. I'm literally the start of Taurus season is my birthday, so I feel like I kind of have a little Aries, like air energy in there at some point. So yeah. I'm also the product of 2 theater parents. My dad was my mom's theater professor in college, so I'm very like, have a lot of shtick. If that makes sense.
What does that mean?
My dad was a theater professor, and he taught a collegiate level. Yeah.
Miss Mac, I thought you were saying something. I'm like, wait, where are we going? I think you're saying theater professor.
Oh. No, theater, like the arts. I definitely grew up like backstage in the theater with my parents, so yeah, I'm eclectic in that way. Yeah.
Okay, no, I love it. I can't even see exactly what you're wearing, but I just even love like, I feel like it's a dress, like the whole peak and swirly. Yeah, I love it. Me, if you could guess, just from the little interaction that we've had, what do you think would be my big thing?
I honestly think, I feel like Pisces maybe, like there's some Virgo in there maybe too, and a Gemini? I don't know. Am I totally wrong? I would say maybe too like Leo. You give me a little Leo.
I'm definitely not a Pisces, so that's the first. I've never heard anyone think that I was a Pisces, but I can see how I probably give up Pisces right now with like the crystals in my ears and very fairy like. You see, Virgo, I'm not going to go too much on Virgo because you say you're Virgo rising. And I do have a lot of Virgo friends. I have a lot of Virgo rising friends. I have a lot of Virgo rising friends. The Virgo suns,
Yeah, I've dated a few of those.
So I'm not going to go too much in on them. And you said Gemini, and I'm so sorry, but I'm definitely going to say, hell no. I don't mean to I don't mean to disrespect any of our Gemini listeners. Every sign is a great, amazing sign. But no, yeah, way off. I actually am a Leo stellium. I'm rising, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Venus. I am a Taurus moon. Oh, we have two big threes together. I was only thinking we had one. I am a Taurus moon, and I am a Cancer sun.
Cancer sun! Oh, so sweet. As my Cancer moon, I'm like, I understand. But yes, I'm glad you have that Leo to balance you out. That's actually funny because that's what mine were the big three were Taurus, Leo, and Cancer until I found out that I was Virgo rising. So yeah.
Great. Miss Mac, tell us a little bit about yourself. Anything that you want listeners to know just before we get into the nitty gritty, which is not really going to be anything nitty or gritty, but it's just a saying I like to say.
Yeah, I definitely started getting sober in like 2016, so I've kind of had a long journey of sobriety. I did moderating for a bit, and I was sober initially for like a year and a half. And when I first got sober, I really had no idea how to navigate sobriety and intimacy. I am a musician, as I said before, and I feel like that just puts me in spaces where I'm like, was always at the bar or like was at a show, and I just really didn't know how to approach people or go on dates or anything like that once I started my sober journey. So creating the Sober Sex series has really been in my heart since like even before I pursued sex education, and just like wanting to have more queer friendly spaces that people could come that are navigating sobriety, because I feel like a lot of dating is out at the bar and things like that. So yeah, it was just important to me as I started getting sober and developing my own queer and pansexual identity to find like-minded people and community on this journey. So I'm really happy to be here and just to talk about this issue, because I think it's such an overlooked topic in the sobriety world, and a lot of it is based on like abstinence only education. So thank you so much for giving me the space just to talk with you a bit more about this.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. And before we get into more of intimacy and sobriety, I do want to, tell listeners how Miss Mac got here to the SBGC platform. Miss Mac, Sober Sex Series was, because now I'm saying was, because the retreat is over, was a 2024 fall retreat sponsor. We're eternally grateful.
Woo!
For your support. This year's retreat was a success. It was in Houston, Texas, 4 days, 3 nights. We were able to do campfires, have a gorgeous welcome barbecue that we had at an institution, a recovery institution called Council on Recovery, where they just like laid out the red carpet for us. That was beautiful. We were able to get transportation, our own transportation, instead of taking Ubers everywhere, which we have to have done, which we did for the last 2 retreats, which was very costly. We were able to do campfires, go on a hike, just something else. Oh, we went on like a plant edible campfire and like edible plant hike where we ate like edible leaves and things of that nature.
Like foraging and stuff like that?
Yeah, foraging. Cool. That's the word. We did we had a tarot session. We had a tarot reader came out, a really, really great, amazing one. Shout out to Cecily from Type Writer Tarot. She came out with a tarot workshop for us. We had a knitting instruction, pool time, dinners, great food. So it was just a really, really great time, and we definitely couldn't have done it without your support. And as a token of our gratitude, I definitely, anyone who supports SBCC deserves a platform on our platform. So I definitely thought it was appropriate to invite you on here, especially because you do have a community that is extremely important and talks about things that a lot of folks are not talking in the recovery community. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again for sponsoring our retreat. You know what? Tell us real quick, why is it important to you to, I guess, sponsor or help out or support organizations like Sober Black Girls Club and the initiatives and things that we do?
Yeah, I feel like just in this realm of sobriety and recovery, there's so many people that look like me that are like cis-passing white women talking about recovery and sobriety, and there's not really a lot of space or accessibility for other people to have those same kind of platforms. So I feel like this is just such an invaluable resource because it's outside of those traditional like 12-step programs of recovery, and also gives emphasis to different groups that maybe aren't supported or thought of or taken care of in this sphere. And I also just really like to support joy. Like I'm a big proponent of joy, and I think that in sobriety it's really easy to focus on like, okay, like it's so hard, like I'm doing this all day, like I'm working on my cravings and everything, and so I just think that y'all's space really cultivates joy and community with people in recovery, and I feel like that's just something that is very important to also focus on, because we don't want to give ourselves such a hard time all the time, and we need a break. So I'm just so grateful to support y'all and to have found your org. I honestly think I've been ever since I started this sphere, I honestly feel like it's been like maybe 4 years or something that I've followed y'all's group and account. So it's just like a cool full circle moment to be here with you as well today. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And talking about joy, I do feel intimacy is joyful. Can be joyful, actually, I should say, depending on the experience and the environment, what's going on. And like you were saying earlier, I do feel personally, in my experience, getting sober, I'll be very honest with you, I haven't been intimate with anyone since I've been in sobriety, and not because I don't want to. I think that in the height of my addiction is when I was, I like to say, is when I was like having a whole phase.
Yes. I used to say I'm like a monogamous slut, so I totally understand.
I was having my whole phase. I was like trying to deal with a breakup. At the same time, I was in the height of my addiction, so money was scarce, and dating was one of the ways where I was able to like still go out and like eat great food and go to like the hottest clubs and just live the New York City life that I was living, the high grand life that I was living. So it would help me, like dating helped me be able to do that. Which, saying that out loud, I don't know, that sounds like really horrible, but it is what it is. That's where I was. So once I got into recovery, I just have like, I'm just like here, present in the body, and conscious of all the things that I've done in the past, which I don't have shame around them, maybe some guilt, but like I'm just like, it is what it is. I did what I did when I felt like it was appropriate to do it, and now it's just hard for me to be intimate. So spill the tea, spill what you know, anything you want to say in regards to sobriety and intimacy. We want to hear it. We want to make sense of our experiences. I'm not the only one who is experiencing this. A lot of folks that I talk to, they're like, yeah, like it's just so hard. Even though I know dating and intimacy are different things, I think, not all dating can be intimate, but I feel like for the most part, I like my dating to be a little intimate. I think people who I speak to, same, but it's just so hard for us to engage in any level of intimacy, let alone dating. Now that we're in recovery.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like when you were talking about going out and like enjoying like the perks of dating or just like experiencing, I feel like dating gives you a really good opportunity to explore different parts of yourself that you maybe hadn't explored in different connections. So in a similar way, as you get sober or sober curious, you're like, who even am I in this sphere? Like what do I like, what am I interested in, who am I interested in, and I think a good thing to start with is honestly building intimacy with yourself. Like as much as it is important to look at different connections that can build you up, really having like a self-intimacy ritual. That was what I did my first like in-person and virtual support groups for sex and substance use this past month, and we talked a lot about redefining intimacy. That was the theme, because I do think that people, when they think of intimacy, they're like, oh yeah, it's like flirting or like physical intimacy, but there's just so many different ways to connect with people, whether like emotionally or spiritually or even with yourself, and we crafted a self-intimacy ritual. So that's something that I would suggest, which is just like a quick, like 1 to 2 minutes every day. It could be something you're already doing. Say you're like, you brush your teeth in the morning and you just like take a second to stop and notice, like, how are you feeling today? Or like, what does this cold water feel like in my mouth or on my face, or just taking a moment, and it can really mean like, oh, this sucks, like my day sucks, or like I'm having the worst cravings today. But having those moments with yourself and developing a consistent ritual for yourself can really help you feel more empowered in the ways that reach you to be intimate and to be connected to yourself. So yeah, I would say starting with looking at yourself, and really being honest about where you're at, because it's also important to cultivate intimacy like with your friendships and like with your chosen family, and really finding different avenues that you can explore those different facets of yourself like you did before when you were like going out and dating in that way too.
How do you help folks find intimacy? You said a really important thing just now when you were describing intimacy with oneself, of saying like how do you feel, and looking in the mirror. But I wasn't even thinking necessarily that being a part of intimacy, but you actually are being intimate with yourself. And I know that there's going to be some people, I don't even know what I'm going to title this episode yet, but I know folks are going to be like, what are we talking about? Sex. But I think we're talking more about sex. We're talking about intimacy. Can you actually define what intimacy is? Like, what is intimacy? What is the definition of it? For you?
Yeah, I think that it's just establishing a connection and consistent relationship with yourself and with others, where you feel seen in like a safe and really consistent way. So in this past in our past workshop, we were talking about the intimacy triangle, and that's just like different ways to craft intimacy with yourself and others. And the three components of the triangle are consistency, vulnerability, and positivity. So consistency would be like developing that kind of consistent ritual with yourself where you're checking in with yourself. And positivity would be not necessarily like, oh, I'm always so happy and like this is great, but really just cultivating like joy, as we were talking about earlier, in your connections, and it's like having fun together or being alone with yourself and enjoying your own company. And then vulnerability, which I think is kind of the hardest piece for us in the sober curious sphere, to start being honest about maybe those deeper parts of yourself that you have either kept hidden from yourself or from others as you're exploring your journey, so that you give yourself an opportunity to really be known and be seen for like who you are today, rather than just like who you were, or using kind of that substance use to like define you. Because I think a lot of times when you get sober, you're like, okay, like I'm sober now, like everything's great, and in reality it's just that one next step that helps you get to know yourself better, and that kind of starts a whole nother journey of getting to know like who you are without or with less substance use.
So how do you feel, and in what ways is being intimate with oneself, which now I'm thinking about intimacy in the less, I don't want to say quote unquote nasty way that I was thinking about earlier.
Yeah.
How can being intimate with oneself lead with intimacy with other people?
Yeah, so it can help you kind of like get to know like what do you even like, because I do think that as we maybe hid or kind of just like shroud ourselves in substance use, we just kind of in some ways become numb to like what pleasure really looks like for us and what joy really looks like, using substances to kind of like fall back on as that way of just like, yeah, I got this, I don't need to really be honest. So I do think that being more connected to yourself can allow you to just know what your boundaries are, or get to know like what you're comfortable with intimately. Whereas like maybe before, I mean, I know myself, I would definitely jump into a lot of like performative intimacy where I would be with someone, with a partner, and maybe not really even enjoying myself that much, but just like, this is what I saw like in porn, or this is what I saw like all my friends doing, and so I should do that because it's going to make me feel sexy. But now it's like, what honestly makes me feel sexy is like putting on my towel after a shower and like just sitting with myself in the mirror, like doing yoga and like getting more connected to my body, and it's like, ooh, like I feel good. So I think it just helps you find other ways to feel good that aren't necessarily reliant on substances, so that you can really approach dating from more of like, not necessarily like a need where like I need this connection or I need this like intimacy, but something that you are choosing, or that you have a little bit more autonomy in the choices that you're making now that you have less or aren't using substances.
I love that. I really do love that. I feel like we were just talking about that at our retreat in one of our meetings. I feel like for me, like in my life, not necessarily platonic relationships, but romantic relationships, I feel like I've never really initially liked anyone I have been with. Like initially, I didn't like necessarily. I know it sounds so. When I say it, I mean that sounds normal. But like I dated a lot on like status quo, on how I thought like I and this person will look together. But like the people who I've dated in the past, I've never was like, oh, there's an immediate connection. It was almost like a checklist of like, okay, I needed to secure this. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't like love in it eventually. And you know, when you're with someone 24/7 for like a couple of years, you're gonna grow. Well, maybe not everyone, but like, of course, I grew to like love some of them, like some of them. But you know, I never had that with like really anyone. And I came to later to realize, because I didn't have that with myself. Like I was always very critical of myself, always just very demanding, always just having negative self-talk, like nothing was ever good enough. And that's how I viewed other people. And I will say that in my recovery, it was about getting to know me, but also accepting me and knowing that I'm enough. I don't need to, it's so crazy how like such a 180 of now saying that like this person isn't going to make anything when it comes. They just add. I need to have the joy. I need to have the confidence. I need to have the security. I need it already here, and like other folks just add to it. So I definitely see like in terms of like being intimate with myself, and what that looked like for me was definitely, you know, people don't see that cancer side, but definitely crying when I need to, and usually it's in the morning. Usually in the morning, just crying and accepting like what I'm feeling, and luckily
that cancer life, cancer sun.
but luckily because I am cancer, and what you release, it usually fleets, and I'm feeling, you know, something different, totally different in 10 minutes, which is what I love. Like I know when I'm sad, unless there's something that actually happened, the sadness is not gonna stay there or be here forever. Definitely doing my hair, doing my nails. Eating really good food without like cooking. Like I used to only the only time I used to ever cook was cook for someone. I wouldn't cook for myself because it was a lot of work. And honestly, I really don't like cooking. I know it sounds horrible for Cancer / Taurus moon, but I really don't like cooking. But when I'm in that mood of being intimate with myself, I will cook myself a meal or buy myself a really expensive meal. So I definitely get that, and through being intimate with myself, I have become less dependent for intimacy on other people, hence why I have been single and sexless since 2019. Anyways.
Yeah, do you think it really like helps you build trust with yourself and like really rely on yourself instead of focusing on like the outside relationships? Because obviously like codependency and like cultivating new boundaries, like that is hard. That is something that just constantly will be evolving in your journey, and something that isn't going to just be like stagnant. And I think this like autonomy piece is such a piece of like the harm reduction sphere, where we're giving people more agency and autonomy over their bodies, over their substance use, and just over how they want to approach usage in their life, and acknowledging like those spectrums of sex and sobriety that maybe aren't always acknowledged in like AA or places that, because I think with AA they're like the 1 year rule, like don't date, don't hook up with anyone, like, and that does bring value to some people. I'm not discounting that at all, but I do think that approaching it from a harm reduction perspective really gives a lot more agency to and nuance to like the actual individual that's going through this process. Because I know y'all have like milestone Mondays that you do, I think sometimes, or you've done in the past, and I think that's such an important piece of harm reduction where you can make up your own milestones, you can make up your own celebration. It can be like, I only drank 2 drinks this weekend and like I deserve a little treat, you know. It gives you a lot more space to celebrate instead of like, oh, I drank, now I'm starting back at square one. The harm reduction aspect gives you a lot more nuance to like your own specific journey of substances too.
Yeah, you just said a mouthful. I'm gonna ask you about 2 things that hopefully that will stay in my mind. Y'all, there's like the sun is like blaring in my face, and honestly, I keep on trying to like ignore the fact that it's making it hard for me to think, but it is. But I have no other choice but to sit in this position. So forgive me, excuse me. But 2 things. Okay, so definitely understand the importance of intimacy with oneself, and then how that can help lead to intimacy with other people that's not codependent, that's based on security and confidence and authenticity. But as you were talking, I couldn't help but think that in today's society where everything, you know, I'm going to put explicitive on this episode, everything is really fucked. The economy is horrible. The job market is horrible. The home market is horrible. Everything is horrible, and I feel like because of the state of like just how things are, do you think, I do feel like it's really hard for people to be intimate with themselves, and I do feel that to combat everything that's going on in one's personal life, which then, you know, in a perfect world, it wouldn't reflect how we internally feel. But until we get to that point where we do know how to separate the material realm with, you know, the internal realm, for a lot of people, it does go hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. I just feel like too, in lots of recovery spaces, they're not acknowledging those actual real life and like like in AA, they're like, we don't talk about politics, and you know, I'm not knocking anyone's, whatever helps you get sober or stay sober curious. I'm obviously not knocking that, but there's just so much more, like especially for sex education too. There's like anti-trans laws, there's anti-LGBTQ plus laws, there's anti-abortion laws, there's so much kind of quote unquote against us in this space, and also just like so much stigma that's associated with like substance use that it can be really hard to meet yourself where you're at, or even like know where you're at on your journey. And I think that with COVID starting, 4 years ago or so, that totally created a different realm of how we view connection and intimacy, because now we're a little more afraid to get close to people, or like we didn't have any practice for like a year being out in society again. And I remember I made a post like when we first started, or when COVID first started, about what does intimacy look like now in this day and age. And I think just having different kinds of connection, even if it's like virtual, like having this virtual sex and substance group that I've started, or like I went to a couple of like COVID and grief meetings when it first started too, and figuring out different ways to develop like a connection with others that maybe is not as like face to face, but it also gave such an opportunity to like expand yourself outside. Because I got really into Queer Sober Atlanta. I started going to like their groups. I'm not from Atlanta, but I knew that they were like a queer sober organization that I could connect to with COVID. So it did give me some opportunity to kind of expand my realm of like how I even thought it was possible to connect with people. So I do think in some ways it like has given us different opportunities to connect with people outside of just like our in-person day-to-day. But yeah, it can be a very long and just intentional process to start building up your feeling of like wanting to be connected to people or wanting to know how to go out again. I also created the Sober Pride Guide. If people are interested in that, it's just a free resource. You can find it on my Instagram or just on my website at sobersexseries.com, and that helps people navigating. Oh, you're good. Navigating sex and intimacy, or navigating their space with how to. Sorry, how to navigate. Too many variables.
No, you're fine.
But yes, the Sober Pride Guide is another example of that, where you can use that if you have pride or if you have other social events that you want to attend, maybe using less substances or without substances. And it has just some like journal prompts that you can check in with yourself, and also some of those affirmations that we were talking about before, to really kind of remind yourself like this is not easy, this isn't an easy process. And that free resource is on my website and my Instagram too, if people are needing that kind of support, like getting back out there again into society after really being isolated.
All right, I'm actually gonna really check that out because it's so crazy, which is probably not so crazy because you just said right now it's a shared experience. I actually had to stop going to like balls and drag shows because I kept on relapsing every time I went. And it wasn't, child, I'm not even getting to like, it'll be a whole other episode. It wasn't necessarily, just to make it clear, and I know you already know that, it wasn't necessarily what was going on at these events, because I love being around other queer people. I love attending drag shows. I love attending balls. And I still haven't been able to put a finger on why I was always just felt so. I don't know what the feeling is. So I'm definitely going to check out that book, your guide. But yeah, I can totally relate to that of going out and events. And I know other people can too, because we have a sober and queer meeting on Tuesdays. And I remember sharing this at a meeting where like, yeah, I just had to stop going because I just felt like every time I was there, I wanted to do drugs. I wanted to drink. And most of the times that I would go, I would just, and it would be a very thought process to something. It wouldn't be like, oh, I'm fine. It would just be like, I'm just gonna do like, and I would hate that. And I do want to figure out why. But with that in mind, yeah, I stopped going to balls and all that fun stuff.
Well, I think too, just like so many queer events are based out of alcohol, and now, luckily, in the past like couple years, there's been a lot more like sober queer bars or sober events where they're just making space for that. But there's still just such a culture around like queer, even pride. Like pride is a party, and I mean, I just think that guide, the Sober Pride Guide, is something that I really needed as a musician starting to go out again. Like I got sober in like the dead of winter initially in the Midwest, and literally the only thing that everyone did at that time was like go to the bars and get drunk. And being a musician, I was always out at the bars, like whether or not I really wanted to be. So that guide is just a space to check in, like with yourself, and it also provides some prompts like while you're out, or just some strategies that you can use to decide like maybe I have like a curfew tonight, or like maybe I have like a limit, or there's like an accountability buddy in there, just different strategies that you can use to support your sobriety or your sober curiousness at those events in a way that's like actually curious, and gives you some agency over how you want to approach going out again when you're being sober.
And I think queer or not, a lot of people can benefit from that guide, honestly. Well, I don't know what's in the guide. I haven't looked at it yet. I am but it sounds like something that a lot of folks, queer or not, can benefit from. So yeah, that's wow.
Something I was thinking about too, as we're talking about like the nuance and how to relate in this new realm of what intimacy looks like now. That is something with the Sober Sex Series community that we are really working to support where people are at. So we have 3 different tenets of the Sober Sex Series community, and the first one is expand, which is expand your definition of what sex is. So sex can really be defined as like whatever your definition is. And the second one is embody, and that would be like embody wherever you find yourself on your journey with sex and substances. So whoever is interested in learning more about sex and substance use, they're very welcome in the Sober Sex Series community. And the last tenet is our engage, which is engage in a brave space to share without judgment. So I really think that it's important in community that we take care of each other and that we're like looking out for one another, especially as we can't rely on systems to protect us or to support us. It's just so much more important to cultivate your own community that really supports where you're at today. So I just want to invite anyone that is looking for that kind of support into the Sober Sex Series community as well.
Yeah, thanks for going into that. I guess what I'm thinking now, so okay. So your group, correct me if I'm wrong, mostly focuses on intimacy. I guess what I'm saying, I know my listeners, they're kind of like me a little bit. They want to know, like, where does the sex come in? Like, how is that incorporated, or the connection with like sobriety? Like, where does that come in with your group series and your overall platform?
Yeah, I do think that they're especially going to be certified in like holistic sex ed versus like sex education, just like from a more binary or like anatomy perspective. The holistic side gives you just a little bit more embodiment from like to meet yourself from an embodied perspective. So I think that it's something where it kind of combines everything together. Like harm reduction is very important as you approach these things, because you're deciding like how much, it's like chemsex, for example, like how much substance use do I want to use like when I am engaging in sex, or how do I like approach having sex sober now. Yeah, I think that it's just the focus is when we think about intimacy, obviously the focus is like sex and like physical intimacy, but I do think that cultivating other components of intimacy, like emotional, getting to know someone a little bit better, maybe not deciding like I actually don't want to kiss on the first date, or like all I want to do is kiss on the first date. Really setting up new boundaries for yourself so that you can actually engage in sex and substance use in a more like empowered way, rather than kind of getting into those situations where maybe you didn't plan for it and you're like, oh, I don't really know like what I'm going to do now. But I also just think being gentle and compassionate with yourself as you explore these things, because it is such a societal like pressure to like be on, or like sometimes as like femme presenting people, it's like be sexy and like and be like an empowered like woman, and that's just not realistic sometimes in sobriety or sober curiousness. So I would honestly offer just like working to be like body neutral. I know there's a lot of like body positivity and like feeling sexy in your body, but sometimes, especially in substance use, it's just like meeting yourself where you're at and feeling compassion for yourself in that. So even just looking in the mirror and being like, I don't like really like what I see today, but like I'm happy that I'm here, or I have another day. I'm so grateful to have another day. And yeah, I think it's just going to be trial and error. Like, I know that that's not maybe like what listeners want to hear, but I just think that there isn't a one size fits all to like how you're going to approach sex now, and just finding more tools for yourself to feel more empowered within yourself can help you really live a more empowered sex life, that doesn't look like porn, that doesn't look like, you know, what you see on TV, but actually is like honest with where you're at in your own journey. So I would just offer, yeah, being more compassionate with yourself, and like knowing that you're going to make mistakes. Like you also might cross your own boundaries because like, oh, I didn't know that this was a boundary. Like for example, like if you don't want to use condoms, you're like, I'm not going to use condoms. I'm totally fine with that. And then you get into a situation, you're like, you know, actually, like I do feel safer if I use protection or use condoms. So I think that it's just going to be a process, and it's something that if you can have like your friends or your chosen family or people that support you on your journey too, it will help you feel more empowered in your sex life instead of feeling like it's something that's like happening to you or that you can't do. Just like cultivating a choice where it feels accessible.
Oh wow, Miss Mac, you know what it is? I think so on mine, I'm so used to like sex sober. I want to say influencers maybe. I don't want to say being hypersexual, but just like taking great pride and talking about like their new sex life. So I was under the assumption that that's what like your group, which I'm pretty sure you allow people to be happy and talk about free to what their new sex life. But what I'm getting is like, so you're giving education about how to handle. Got it.
Yeah, I would say that aside from like a sex therapist that would maybe be like sitting in with you and your partner, like sitting with you and talking about like erectile dysfunction or like something like that. This would be more of just giving people empowered practices and like prompts and community that they actually feel like they can take with them into their own life and craft the kind of relationships that they want and what they want them to look like now. So a little bit different than sex therapy, like Dr. Sue or whatever that that lady was. I don't remember her name, that did like sex talks with Sue 20, 30 years ago. It is similar to that, but I will say that I'm looking to just empower individuals more as opposed to like tell them what they should do, if that makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. I love it. I love it. All right. I think like I wanted to end the episode with any advice that you would give to folks newly sober. But honestly, I feel like you gave advice throughout this whole episode, and I think that there are people like myself who think this is magical formula of how to get intimate now that we're in sobriety, and I think the answer is just to let it flow. There's no, I guess I'm not even, just from hearing you talk, there's no rush. And that there are things to be learned and unlearned and to be developed.
Yeah, and I think it's just similar to like your sober curious journey, right? Like it's always changing. It's day to day. It's a little bit different. So I just don't think that there is really like a magic pill that's gonna like make you feel like sexy and good. But it's just it's honestly so much more rewarding to be intimate and like honest with yourself about where you're at. And I think it's like very admirable for you saying like, I don't really know how I'm going to approach this, but like at least giving some compassion, like leaning forward or moving forward. And yeah, that it's just going to change and adapt based on your circumstances. Like I really didn't have a name for how I like being pansexual. I didn't use like a label or anything like that when I first got sober, but now I'm like, I'm pan and proud, you know? So I do think in similar ways where your sex life will change, like your identity is changing too, and just acknowledging that kind of like ever evolving piece of ourselves and what we need like in the moment, you know?
Yeah, and I know people say last thing, but truly last thing before. You had said something earlier about the effect of like us, like, you know, body positivity, but body okayness. And I love that because it reaffirmed something I shared over at the retreat this past week of saying that, like, even though I'm proud of myself, because there was a time where I would wake up, as fine as I am, would wake up every day and have something negative to say about myself. And it's so sickening. And now, like, I can look in the mirror, and there's some days where I don't feel fine, I don't feel sexy, and usually it's during the evil stage, called the luteal stage, before my period, where I feel like the most ugliest person in the world. But I'm like, okay, it's this stage, it's my brain chemicals, it's not real, and I don't try to make me feel like I'm pretty. I just say, today I accept that this is how I feel about myself, and I go about my way. It's not debilitating anymore where I'm afraid to talk, I'm afraid to be myself and just move through the world. And, you know, this conversation has definitely been empowering for me, because that is a form of intimacy, of just accepting me for who the fuck I am in different stages of this 4-stage thing that I've never asked for. And it is what it is. So that's definitely real. And I just appreciate you saying that. You know, probably don't know, but for me, it's just confirmation of my own growth and how far I have come, just about my own self, within myself. Yeah, within myself. That's what I'm trying to say. All right.
Yeah, and there are so many like traditional. There are just like so many traditional ways to get sober, but I do think that with Sober Black Girls Club or like in these substance meetings, everyone is going through their own unique experience. And like you're saying, it's not something where you wake up and you're like, I've reached like the pinnacle of this, and now I'm like so empowered and like I'm a sexual deviant or like whatever, you know, like it really just takes, it's something that you might not even notice until you're like until a few months later when you're like checking in and you're like, hey, I didn't think like the worst thing about myself this morning when I woke up. So I would just say, similarly to like the sober curious journey, being compassionate and showing compassion for yourself is a huge part of dealing and navigating sex, dating, and intimacy with sobriety.
All right, let's wrap this up with, do you want to tell our listeners anything you're working on? I know you shared about the guide, you also shared about your meetings, just anything you want to end this episode.
Yeah, I would say if anyone would like more information, my socials are Sober Sex Series, which is sex, unfortunately, is censored, so it's S3x, so Sober Sex S3x, Sober Sex Series, say that 3 times fast, and then, oh, perfect, okay, yeah, because then I also just wanted to say I have the online community via Substack, and that has like my mailing list, and we also have like tips and tricks, and each month we have different themes, and that's askmissmac.substack.com. And then I'd love to see y'all at some of these virtual meetings, or if you're in the Portland area, Portland, Oregon, we have some in-person sex and substance meetings at the only queer substance recovery center in Portland, which is such a shame, but it's called True Colors Recovery Center, and so we'll have those at the end of October too, so I just say be on the lookout for those.
Hey, Miss Mac, it was truly a pleasure. I just feel so liberated. Is that corny? I do feel liberated after.
Yes.
I hope listeners received all of the goodness that I have received. Spoken with Miss Mac. I hope you received it. I'm definitely going to put their socials and website and anything else I feel like you guys should have. I'll definitely put it all in the description of this episode. So you'll have socials, maybe not email, but website. I don't know. Whatever is on your website, I'll put in. It was a joy to have you on here, Miss Mac. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. Until next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.